Good evening, everyone. Will you please take a seat? So my name is Julie Blanford, and I am a member of this church. A couple of housekeeping things. Can you hear me now? So a couple of housekeeping things. There is restrooms over, if you want to go right down the hall here. There's restrooms. We are going to have some snacks and things afterwards. So if you will kind of take your time getting up, I will escort Dr. Archer out into the parlor, and then you can ask her any questions. We are going to have about a 15-minute question and answer period when she finishes talking. So before I talk about her, something happened today that I was listening to the radio on the way to a meeting, and it was on NPR, and Bishop Marianne Buddy was speaking, and she was speaking about culture and how are we going to get together, how are we going to connect, how are we going to do this? And so I get to introduce the woman who knows how to do this. So Dr. Archer is the originator of the culture bump. And this approach was first started in 1978 at the University of Houston and has since trained people in various fields such as international business, religion, education, medicine, and to use this approach in their work and in their lives. In addition, researching the culture bump approach and using it in the classroom setting, she has worked with companies such as AT&T, Shell Oil, Exxon, the World Trade Association, to train over 1,000 businessmen and women from the Middle East, Asia, Latin America, and the United States using the culture bump approach. So she is going to have a lot of wonderful things to talk to you about. She also, besides developing this whole program, she loves to play the piano. She has 2 cats, Lucy and Fiona, and she lives with her nephew, Roger. She has authored and created the creator of Culture Bump products, which are Living with a Stranger in the USA, Communicating Beyond Culture, and the Toolkit for Culture and Communication. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Carol Archer.
I may be moving over here. Okay, now. Okay, I'll just stay over here. Okay, is that one off now?
Yes, it should be.
Okay. Okay, this is a great way to begin. Julie, thank you very much. That was, I like that beginning. And thank you. It is a real gift to get to spend the evening with you, and I hope that something this evening will give you some peace, will give you some insight, will be soothing for your soul tonight. That's my hope for you. So, I have a clicker. So what I want to do this evening is introduce culture bumps and this idea of the culture bump training and give you some of the ways specifically that it has been implemented. And then specifically, I want to bring it back to the idea of how we build community and how we come together in groups of people who have very different points of view about life. That's a fairly recent iteration of the culture bump approach. But I think it's something that, you know, it's kind of what Julie alluded to earlier. It's something that we really, I think some of us were talking earlier, I think there's an openness to that. I think there's a need for that. There's a hunger for that right now. And how this church or your organization might be able to use this for yourselves and how you can continue with this. So we'll start with, how many of you have ever heard of culture bump? Yay. So my friends in the room have heard of culture bump. Okay. That's not all that unexpected. What would you think a culture bump is, just off the top of your heads? Any guesses?
Change.
Little bump?
Something that would prevent you from connecting with others.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, yeah. And that's exactly what happens. It's not that it prevents you, but it breaks the, because one of the assumptions in culture bump is that we are connected as human beings. And that what happens is that we walk along and then something happens and we disconnect. And that is a difference. And it could be something, it's just something that catches your attention. What? Did he just?
Excuse me. We cannot hear you, those of us who are hearing there.
Dr. Archer, let me try something. I think what we found before is if we move the light to more in the middle, because if you turn your head, if it's on one side, it doesn't work as well.
Okay, so are you hearing part of it and not all of it? Okay,
So let me.
we're going to fix that.
Now, your hearing aids only help so much.
I will hold my head, I will keep my head.
Well, now that it's in the middle, you should be okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So a culture bump is just something that catches your attention. Or it is something that you would not do or say. And that's the reason it catches your attention. Okay, making sense? Real simple. It's something somebody does, something somebody says, the way it's said, or something. Those 4 categories. So we're going to look at a little video. This is Mazen. Mazen is from Syria and Josh from the United States. And these were both my students at the University of Houston. And they had been in my class and they know all about culture bumps. And so I said, listen guys, would you just do a quick little video for me that gives an example of a culture bump? And they just looked at one another because they'd listened to me forever about culture bump, you know. And they just looked at one another and they said, yeah. He knew. These are 2 kids from the opposite sides of the world who knew what the other one was thinking. And they did this little video. Okay, and Terry's going to...
Josh, do you like to drink, Sarah?
Yes, please. Whoa, hey.
See?
Culture bump.
Yeah? Okay, I'll sit over there.
Culture bump. Mazen sat, 2 inches from Josh. We don't have to even think about the theory behind it. It was real simple. He just went, oh, culture bump. And so culture bumps are something, they're simple, they're easy, they're not big things, they have nothing to do with theory. They're just the things that you and I encounter every single day. Now this is with a Syrian and a North American. It could easily be with your sister or your husband or your wife. Now we don't know about that, but we do know with the husbands, yes. Somebody on the street. Coming here tonight, some big guy in a big black truck who wouldn't let me over when I needed to get off. I had a culture bump with him because he could, I blinked and he just didn't move. That's not what I do. If somebody blinks in front of me, I kind of pull back and let them in most of the time. But, so you see, it's a part of our lives. It's the way we live our lives. And our brains just go, oh, what did he do that? Now, see, and by the time that I got to the next exit, that guy had become some kind of, I don't even want to tell you what I was thinking about him. But I can't stop my brain. Now, I did not at the moment think, gosh, I just had a culture bump. That wasn't until I sat down to dinner with Julie and told her, I said, I had a culture bump today. I did not react the way I tell people to do. But what it does, it gave those two guys, they have a common language. And I would watch this with my students all the time. My students were from many different countries. And one of them would look at me and say, it's a culture bump. He said, what do you mean a culture bump? What happened? What did I do? What happened? Okay, if you think about the word culture bump, when you say that word, it's like it stops our brains for just a second so that we stop thinking about, why did he do that? That young, whatever. It's like, I had a culture bump, it's mine. It's mine. And it's not about them. So the mission of Culture Bump, and this mission statement was written probably in the last 7 to 8 years, after a lot of years of actually working with it. And so it redefines how cultural understanding, to give people tools and confidence to interact with anyone, anywhere. And that confidence comes from having gathered a lot of data from people who'd been trained with this and asking them what they had gained. And to be quite honest, I was stunned when people kept coming up and said, well, I feel confident now. I didn't expect that. A basic assumption is that you have a vision for a better world, and what Culture Bump gives you are tools to achieve that vision. It's not about giving you a vision, it's not about changing your vision, it's not about refining your vision. You got that. This is just to give you some tools to use. So, this was first developed at the University of Houston, and the Language and Culture Center was an intensive English program. I started teaching there in June of 1975. I come from a cotton farm in West Texas. My parents were farmers. I did not grow up speaking, well, actually I did grow up around a lot of Spanish and speaking some Spanish, but when I got to the university and I'm dealing with students from all over the world, I didn't know what to do with it. And so, that's the Roy Cullen building. So this work was developed out of working with people from all over the world. So this is not a Western idea, this is not an American idea. This has evolved from a global constituency. At that time, let's see, the first thing that came out of that, well, I was trained, my boss at the time sent me to be trained, and what she didn't understand, and I didn't either, was that I was trained to be a corporate trainer. We thought we were sending me to become an educator, but I ended up in a program. This is about 1979, and so there was no Google, and so I was actually trained, and that's what I developed. I came back and developed the perceptions, cultural values, cultural adjustment cycle, communication styles, and this thing of culture bump, because I had that epiphany, I'd had that idea from my own experience. And so that's how it started developing, first with the students. And then starting in about 1981, I started working, because Houston has so many international companies, and so I started getting hired to help develop pre-departure orientations for Americans going overseas, or did a lot of work with Saudi Arabia and with American companies. And so there was a lot of corporate trainings that started in about 1981. The last one that I did was year before last for the New York Times, in which I developed a cross-cultural orientation for Afghan women coming to live in the Houston area. So it has something that has just all through the years. It's been pre-departure, a lot of train the trainers, joint ventures, and it was just a lot of different companies, so. And then when education, starting probably around 2003, I started doing trainings for staff. Not a lot of things with students, although In the last couple of years, there have been some work, particularly in the Black Belt of Alabama, with some high school students. And a lot of that has been done out of Auburn University. So Auburn University is where I've been working as a consultant since I retired from the University of Houston in 2005, and in 2010 started there. So that kind of gives you an idea of how it's just starting to develop. And I wish I could tell you that I planned this. I did plan nothing of this. It's just dropped out of, it's dropped over here. And so I really believe this has been a spiritual path in developing this. Okay. All of this has been focused on the individual learning about perceptions and learning how to use the term culture bump, learning how to use the culture bump steps. When we have that culture bump, when we have that moment when we go, what did you, what, or that, we don't even, yeah. When we have that moment, what culture bump teaches us is that we go through some specific steps. One, the first 4 steps help us to detach, to kind of step back. Because once that happens, I can't stop my brain from beginning to create a story about that person and about why they're doing it, what's going to happen next. I can give you an entire backstory about that guy in the black pickup. I can't seem to stop my brain. I don't know, maybe you can, but I can't. But these steps help me to do that. I pay attention. What did they do? What did I do? And how did I feel about it? We're going to look at this a little bit more in detail. And then in 5 and 7, once we kind of detach, then we look at what's the bigger picture here. What's the situation? What's the universal situation? What would I do in that situation? And how would I feel about me doing that? And then my question becomes, I wonder how he or she does that. How do they feel about whatever that quality is that I have just identified for me? And sometimes it's not always that nice. Sometimes when I really get down here, it's like, whoa, I'm kind of shallow, or that was, but it's interesting. I wonder how that other person is shallow. I wonder if they think they're shallow, But it's about seeing myself and then seeing my blind spot about the other person and having some kind of a conversation about that. Can you click on the good news about this is that those steps are actually on the website, culturebump.com. And if you can just kind of scroll down, you can see, okay, on step 1, I had you can either there's a little drop down there, positive, negative, or neutral culture bump. I had a negative culture bump with the guy on the road. And I thought it was rude. I actually get to give my opinion about it, but that's about the last time. And then the next one is describe what the other person did, and in this case, he stayed, I don't know, I know nothing, but maybe 20 feet behind me. That's really all he did, you see. As I'm standing here, I'm realizing that's really all he did. He just stayed 20 feet behind me. What did I do? Okay, I looked in the mirror, and then I said some things to him out loud in my car, which we will. If I were actually doing it, I would say, I said blah, 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 but I'm not going to say that here. And then what did I feel? And if you could click on tips where it says list the emotions and scroll down a little bit. Yeah, and you can see there are all these emotions. You can just go through and pick them out. So as I'm standing, I felt angry, I felt scared, I felt nervous, I felt wary, it was probably more scared. I was scared. And it really didn't have a whole lot to do with him. It had with me thinking I was going to be late to someplace. So you see how that kind of pokes me out of that whole thing. Yeah. And then the next one is, what is the commonality? The universal situation, what was he responding to? A person with their blinker on in front of him in the next lane over, and he just continued in his lane. And what do I do with that? Well, sometimes I will kind of slow down and let the person come in. Sometimes I don't. Yeah. And when I do, what do I think I'm being? I'm being kind. And I wonder how that guy in the black truck is kind. I wonder where in his life he shows kindness. I bet he does somewhere. Yeah. That's all it is. That's really all it is, ladies and gentlemen. But it's a structured way of reflecting about something in my life and about myself that allows me to reconnect. Okay. And I want to go back. Can you go back up to step? Oh, yeah. Okay. Back. Click on the steps. Okay. And scroll down to step. Let's see. Go. Yeah. Find the universal situation. Scroll. Okay. Open up tips in step 5, please. And scroll down to the very bottom. And you see where it says click here. This is all on the website. You can just simply go there and get this. Okay. Okay, and click on qualities. Okay, you guys are gonna do some work now. Scroll down and generate a universal. These are actually collated from culture bumps that people have that I have actually worked through. And so these are real things. So name a time that you felt naive. What I'd like for you to do is just take a partner, and we're just going to, and look at, here, this is one. Generate another one, please. Name a way that you've been efficient and another way that you're inefficient. Another one, please. Name a time you have experienced compassion for someone and a time you wished you had felt compassion for someone. So, Terry, I think if you can just keep kind of scrolling through these, and if you'll choose a partner and just choose one of these and have a quick little conversation and notice what happens when you have that conversation. Yeah, if you guys, Donnie.
I can partner with him.
Yeah, you and Donnie go. Okay.
I don't know what to pick.
Okay. Okay. Choose one. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we are hot snot. This is good.
What's that? Oh, I think it's working, but now everybody's talking.
Yeah.
I'm slowing down. I like noise I facilitate a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
And noise is such a good thing.
Oh, yeah, it is. I love. Ooh, I like that one.
I do too.
Julie was kind to me today. That was so kind. The way she introduced me.
Yeah, she's a very kind person.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Name somebody that's been kind to you.
A lot of people are kind. What happened to me today? A friend called that wanted to share a story with me. Mm-hmm. You know, she just called me because she knew I would understand the story.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So that was sort of,
Yeah, what else have we got? Yeah, they're not listening. Has someone been considerate? A time you have seen someone being considerate, or you have been inconsiderate. Well, I was kind of inconsiderate to the guy in the truck today. I mean, Oh, I wasn't inconsiderate, but you know, I would have been if I could have.
Does it count? It's like if a tree falls in the forest, does it count?
Only in your heart.
In your heart.
Oh, that one's a good one.
That's an important one.
Uh-huh. I'm so glad to see you. I didn't. This is awesome. Got my little treat.
Everybody seems to be talking.
Yeah.
This is a talkative group.
They're good. They're very good. Okay. So we've got 15 minutes.
What?
We've got 15. The time.
Yeah. So, about 15 more minutes. Can you work that out?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Okay, if I could have your attention. If I could. Okay. If I could have your attention, please. Apparently not. Okay. Okay. Can I have your attention, please? Okay. Hello. Hi. Could I have your attention, please? Okay. All right. So, what happened? What happened besides the fact that I totally lost control of you, you know? You're wandering off on your own out there. What happened in that conversation? I said, what happened to you in that conversation? What was the conversation like? Sharing experiences. Were you talking with people that you know really well? Did you learn something new? No.
Yes, I think
Yes.
we opened up with one.
You openly did, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting. Terry and I were talking back there that the noise level was, yeah, and trying to get your attention back was not easy. What happens in that's what we call a conversation for connection. It's a conversation that will connect you. You can have that same kind of conversation with somebody from Côte d'Ivoire, and you will have a connection. It will forever be there. I used to tell my students, you know, you're going to disconnect again, but never forget, you know how to connect now. And once you learn how to connect, once you learn how to have these conversations, you can connect with anyone. Even if they don't want to do it, doesn't matter. If you ask them the question, they start talking to you, you'll get connected. It's kind of fun. You can do that with people. Okay, all right, if we could go back, yeah. So, detaching, stepping back. Now, what we looked at was number 7, which was what do I feel about something? And as I say, whatever it was that you were talking about is something that somebody actually experienced in a culture bump, and then they put it into, because you can actually, on that website, you can set up a little, what do you call it? It's like your little yeah, you can set up a little profile and keep a copy. And I'm going to show you a copy of one of mine from mine. I had to copy it out because so many of them are really personal, and I didn't want y'all to see them. So, but I will show you this one. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is one that I had probably last year sometime. What had happened, my car it didn't start one morning, so I called AAA, and the guy came out. I think he might have been Nigerian, I don't know. But I had a culture bump, and I thought it was great and touching. And what happened, what did he do? He caught me by the arm and said, "Be careful, Mama," when I stumbled in my garage, as he was looking under the hood of the car, and I kind of stumbled, and he did that. What did I do? I looked at him and said, "Oh, thank you." So you see, these things are real simple. And what I did there is I separated. Well, I haven't quite finished it. The emotions that I felt at that moment when he said that was I felt surprised, I felt amazed, wary, relief, secure, connected, embarrassed, a little bit of fear, and hope. Notice there's all different kinds of emotions there. Now, if you'd asked me right there at that moment, I'd say, I'm fine. I'm fine. The truth was that all those things were there very quickly. But that's what I felt. Now, those 4 steps just pull me out of it. And now then I can go back and and a lot of times I'll just do those first 4 in the middle of something and just, and don't worry about the rest because it'll just detach me immediately. But then the universal situation is a younger person seeing an older person being in a dangerous situation. That happens all over the planet Earth. An older person is kind of in a dangerous situation, they're rocking or something, and a younger person sees it. What do? Mm-hmm. What I do is I go close and say, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" I will, okay. I'll touch them only if I feel like they're actually falling. Okay, or they're actually falling, I will touch them. And then I'll say something like, "Okay, there we go." That is really slippery, I almost fell myself, Now, I have not been the younger person in quite some time, but when I was, that's what I did, yeah. And what that means is that I'm trying to help them while maintaining their dignity. It's empowering, and I'm showing concern. That's what I think when I'm doing that. And how do Nigerians empower the elderly, or if they do? If they don't, I'm not sure what they do. And I think my American need to empower them comes from our need for independence. This kind of idea we're always climbing a staircase. That's kind of the American. I see that as being very American. And this morning I was looking at this, preparing for you guys, because I didn't want to make it, And I was looking at that and I thought, why would I think I need to empower the elderly? Where does that come from? And I thought that comes from the idea of maybe the elderly don't have power in this culture, that we're frail. I'm now putting myself in that category. And I thought about working with Africans. And I thought, I have a suspicion that that's not true in Nigeria. I suspect that the elderly in Nigeria are not considered, that they have some power. There's power simply in being an elder. But it was a revelation. This was a couple of years ago, but I'm still thinking, I'm still seeing things about myself, about my cultural beliefs and things, and really interested in having a conversation. So you see how this works? And it doesn't really, it's not like, okay, got this done. This is kind of a lifelong of experience of understanding more about me and being curious about another culture. I did a great deal of work in the last couple of years in the Black Belt in Alabama. And that was one of the things that it's the first time that I experienced being an elder. And having these, I have a couple of other culture bumps with some of the folks in Alabama in the same way. So, is this making sense? Yeah, okay. So that's the core of how the culture bump works. Now, there are all other kinds of things that we study with it, like cultural values and communication styles, but this is the core. This is really where we go down and look at who I am and wonder about who you are. And how are we the same? This is how I do it. How do you do that? The assumption is that we do the same thing, not that you're different. You may do things differently. Okay. So up until about 9/11, basically I did this mostly with individuals. You know, they might be in a corporate setting, but I'd be teaching individuals how to use culture bumps. After 9/11, my sister Mary, who was a sociologist, and I decided we wanted to try to do this with groups of women. And we brought together 3 groups of women: Jewish women, Muslim women, and Christian women. And we called ourselves the Daughters of Abraham. And we looked at our culture bumps with one another and then had conversations about how we are the same. How do we react when we are fearful of our children moving away from our faith path, from our path? How do we react? What kinds of things do we do? These are universal things that women experience, these women have experienced. What do we do when we want to dedicate our child, a baby, in our faith? How do we do those things? These were amazing conversations. Unfortunately, we didn't follow up with it. My sister was diagnosed with cancer, and so then she and I went on that journey together. But the next time that I did this after that was in a program called Building America's Villages, in which we brought together immigrant Americans and American-born Americans. Right over here was out of Texas City, and a Catholic church in Texas City, and ESL classes in the Texas City area. And it was amazing. You can actually, it's on the blog in that culture bump that's called Houston Demographics and Who Is My Neighbor Anyway? And we had amazing experiences with that, where the church and the immigrants began to develop classes together, work with teenagers together, develop civics classes together. And it all took a long time to do all this. The next time was in 2017, when I brought together 7 people that had already knew about culture bump, and I said, let's try this with politics. And we came together, liberals and conservatives. Yeah, and we were a lot of other things too. And that's where we made some real shifts. That's where this book came out of that, which is literally using the steps as the core of any training. And I'm actually going to show you what we learned with that, is that when we're dealing with groups who have really different ideals, the way we do those steps need to be done differently. First, you can see you're either doing them all together or doing them in separate groups. And so those first 3 steps, finding something we disagree about, we do it together. I'll say, you agree with that? No. Okay, I do. Okay, good, we got something. And then we do step 1. We have to find something specific to tell us exactly what we're responding either favorably or unfavorably to. And then we say, what do we do? And usually we just look at the computer screen or whatever. Then when we're dealing with emotions, we separate. We don't deal with our emotions with people who disagree with us. We go to people who feel the way we do. Now, this is what normally happens in life. We get off with people who agree with us, and we talk about our feelings, and we agree with one another, and we walk off. That's only step 4 in this process. Then we come back together. And after having dealt with all of our emotions, and we say, so what is the universal situation here? And we decide together what that is. Then we separate again, and we say, this is what I would do. This is what we think should be done then, on each side. And this is what we think that means. And then we come back together and talk about that, just like you did just a minute ago. We start from our meanings and move ourselves back up. Making sense? 3 things that happen. Everyone agrees on the exact point of contention. Rarely do we do that in real life. Mostly we just go, we rarely start with, this is exactly what I disagree with. And then we acknowledge and deal with our emotional investment away from one another. We don't need to be dumping that, but we need to do it. It has to be dealt with. It's real. And so we do that, but we do it with the people that like us. And we clarify everything in a safe environment. So this is in that workshop in 2017. We ended up talking about free education, step one. Step two, we looked this up. Senator Sanders said, this is what he said. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, a higher education should be a right for all, not a privilege for two. And what we did in that group is we looked at the computer screen and read what he said. That's it. Now, notice we're not talking about feelings or ideas right here. This is what we did. Then we went into separate groups and talked about our feelings about it. And then we came back together and decided that the Universalist is how we're going to have individuals access higher education. And we talked about through personal means or sponsored by government. We had all these different ideas, and each group had very different ideas. And then we came back together and we had these conversations. Name the last time that you felt compassion. Tell me about something you do or have done that was effective. So we began having those. So in other words, we had conversations about what our blind spot about what the other person was, what we couldn't see them doing. And we asked them to tell us, how do you do that? And then we can begin the other conversations. We connect. This is
a group of very diverse individuals met for 3 Saturdays in 2017 to explore how to apply the 8 culture bump steps to reach across our divisions. We included people with diverse spiritual paths. We were Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, as well as no spiritual belief, and we came from diverse backgrounds: the United States, Pakistan, Palestine, Vietnam, and Russia. And we held both conservative and liberal beliefs. In short, we were a microcosm of the USA. What we did share was a desire to move beyond differences and find a way to connect, to have conversations for connection. And like most Americans, we weren't sure if it was possible, and we were willing to try. The culture bump approach leads us to have those conversations for connection. And those conversations need 3 things. Number 1, we all agreed on the exact point of contention. Number 2, we acknowledged and dealt with our emotional investment with like-minded folks. And number 3, we clarified our expectations and solutions in a safe environment. We did this by using the 8 culture bump steps in a specific way. With steps 1, 2, 3, and 5, we did those as a group. But then we broke into liberal and conservative groups in order to do steps 4, 6, and 7. And then 8 brought us together again. And today, 7 years later, we are still friends. Many of us still work together, and no one has changed how he or she votes or prays or not.
So, yeah, and as I say, we're still working together, and nobody changed. It's not about changing the other persons. It's not about changing yourself. It's about expanding how we can actually include one another in our worldviews. So that workshop that we did that you just saw took us 3 days, lots of food. It was really hard. I told them, I said, listen, we'll get in the middle of this and we get in big fights, we're going to all go home. They said, okay. But we didn't. And so what we've been able to do from that now is come up with a 1-day workshop in which we go in and we have a deeper look at cultures. And instead of looking at culture as being like a national culture or an ethnicity, we look at, in all the cultures that we all belong to. You just made a comment. I said something about this is a noisy group, and you said it's always like that. That's part of your culture. That's part of your culture. That's, you're a talkative group. You like talking. That's part of your culture. But that's only one of probably 300 or 400 cultures that you belong to, at least, a minimum. And then we look at that. And then we can use this book, because the book actually has the case studies now. And so we use those books We use those case studies to practice. And then we choose a culture bump, maybe like Houston, New York or something, unless somebody's from New York in here, I don't know. But we could do that, or we could do a Houston, I don't know, Houston, Dallas one. Oh, yeah. And then you have to eat together. You can't go running off. You have to eat together. And then we coach one another through some personal culture bumps. So you sit in like groups of like 3 people, and you coach one another through like a personal culture bump. Like I had one with my sister maybe, or I had one with my friend. And then we do a group. If there's a difference in the group, then we do a group. And usually there are some differences, even if you don't set it up that way. Now, I set up that particular workshop, I wanted liberals and conservatives. And what I got were liberals and conservatives, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and atheists. So it was great, And the last thing that we do is we walk through a valley of values together, in which we kind of, just kind of look at what our values are and how they show up and share that with one another. Kind of like the conversation you had. So and what happens is we stay connected. So, all right, and so in that workshop, everybody gets this book, and then that actually comes from out of the toolkit. Auburn University has the entire toolkit online. The entire course is there, and so we take one of the modules from that and use that, which is about cultural values. Okay. All right. So this is for the church, or any organization that wants to do this. I'm looking for people to do this. I'm looking for people to learn how to do this and then take it and run with it. I have almost 50 years of this stuff developed, and I've got lots of stuff. And I will come in, I will give you this stuff, and let's go with it. But in order to do a day, a venue, lunch, get some people here, approximately $350 for all the materials, and that's it. So, anything? Any questions? Or any?
We're going to have a question and answer if you have some questions. We have Chris, Ken. Ken has the microphone.
If you raise your hand, Ken will come to you.
Right.
Try to keep one question though, so everybody gets a chance.
Okay.
How do you feel about the lack of DEI
The lack of DEI.
that Trump has done?
How I feel about it is how I feel about it is I do a culture bump on it, and then I go to work. That's kind of the way I deal with it. I just talked to my colleague from Auburn. She called me up the other day, and she said, and I said, we're going to put one foot in front of the other. Because what this does, what Culture Bump does, is it gets the job done, and it gets it done without it's kind of neutral. It's really about building some skills and building community. That's all. It's not really, as she said, it's what we need. And I said, yes, I know. Yeah, it works. And my experience in talking with people about this is that on both sides of the political spectrum, there's real interest in it. It doesn't seem to be something that is considered off-putting from either side of the spectrum. Yeah.
It's kind of okay. So what was at what point or what happened to cause your the beginning of Culture Bump? Where did it come from, or was there a circumstance that happened that set off the spark to start this?
I was living. Yeah, I grew up in West Texas, so I didn't have a whole lot of experience with other cultures. And I had gone to live, I had been sent by the University of Houston to work and live in Algeria, North Africa, for a year. And I was woefully, I had no skills for living there, and it was really, really horrendous. And when I came back to the States, people kept saying, you need to have an open mind, you need to respect differences, and I couldn't do it. And I finally just thought, there's something really wrong with me because I don't know how to do this. And I was going to leave education. I was teaching international students, and I no longer really believed in what I was doing. And so and it was one day in October, and I was walking out of the back steps of the Roy Cullen building, and I had that epiphany. And I suddenly understood. I had these two big bubbles that kind of came in my mind, and that term culture bump came up. And in that nanosecond, I understood that there was everything that had happened to me. I'd had a cajillion culture bumps, and I'm okay, and so are the Algerians. And everything, I kind of knew everything at once, and then I've spent the rest of my life working on it. So, thanks. So yeah, there was one incident that did that. And in that moment, I also decided I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to keep working with it and develop it and give it away. So.
Any other questions?
I have friends that I talk with quite regularly, and some of them have what I would call alternative facts on how things work, or alternative truths that are totally different than mine. And how do you deal with that when there's two literally sets of reality? And this is somewhat fomented by our politicians today.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one of the things, and that's why the culture bump, if you go back to those steps, and that first and that second step, the two sides, whatever they are, actually has to find. And like, for example, when on I have a friend who really is very conservative, and he really did not like President Obama, and he kept saying, and I said, well, give me an example. And it took a couple of days before we could finally Google and found something that former President Obama had actually said. And he said, that's it. So we had one thing that he said, and that's where we began. And that's why it's so critical to do those first 1, 2, 3. Because that's where you find something that you actually agree you disagree about. And you can begin there. This is like pre-kindergarten. Seriously, that's what we're doing, is pre-kindergarten. And then we can move from there. But yeah, it's a great question. Yeah.
So this isn't something that one person does by themselves. It's like you have to have a willing partner to agree to do this with?
No.
Well, talk to me about that then.
Okay. Well, like, for example, what I just showed you up there about the Nigerian, that was just me. Okay, and I could have had that was not for anybody. I never talked to the Nigerian driver about it. I did it after he left because I went, wow, that kind of, I just noticed that I was still thinking about it. And so when that happens, it gives me an opportunity to just, really understand something deeper about myself and begin to look at another person. So yeah, you can do it by yourself. That's why it's on one of the people in that workshop in 2017 was a young woman who's 23. And she keeps saying, Dr. Archer, my generation won't read books. They're not going to do this. And so we took that book, and she developed what you just saw on the website. You just go there and go down and you do your little culture map all by yourself. And it gives you relief. It gives you some relief. So yeah, for many years, that's all we did, it was just for the individual. It's only fairly recently that I've been working with trying to do this with groups of differing ideas, yeah. And you can, and the cool thing is that when you get down to like that quality or that universal situation, you can talk to anybody and say, so listen, and they'll get right in there with you, and they haven't even been through they don't even know the word culture bump. Yeah. When you really figure the process out, you can do all kinds of things with it. Yeah.
I was very, very confused at the first thing that you asked us to do was to come up with something that was hopeful and something that wasn't hopeful. Did I understand that correctly? I had a very difficult time finding some examples. Is that common, or is that something that's...
Because these are the kinds of things that we don't normally think about. See, that term, hopeful, was somebody came up with that when they sat down and did their culture bump. And that's what they realized. It was, oh, I'm hopeful, or I'm not hopeful about that. That was their quality that they identified. And so we know that that's a universal quality. But our brains don't normally operate at that level. Our brain, we just don't. We don't think like that. And so yeah, it is not.
That normal way of thinking is just.
This is counterintuitive. Yeah, we talk about hope, and we had a whole political campaign based on hope, and yet it's difficult for us to actually, in our own minds, understand what is that for me. How does that live in my brain, in my soul? Where is hope for me? You see. And so, yeah, it is not, this is all counterintuitive. It's all moving us to think and to experience ourselves and one another in a way we don't normally do. Because the way we're normally doing it isn't working too well.
What if you bump and crash? For example, the election was slow, and I got into conversation with a young man who was studying philosophy, and he was talking. And finally he stopped, and he wanted to know my reactions, and I told him, and he goes like, I take offense to that. And it's like, we'd have, it was fine with him as long as I was listening and I didn't say anything. But then when I started talking about my ideas, he was offended and really didn't really want to. We crashed.
Yeah. That's the whole point of doing the culture bump. The whole point of first of all, having a term, having a common language that you can talk about it. I mean, that's what our brains will do. We will crash. We will not. If we simply stay talking about my point and your point and my point, that's what happens. At least that's what's happening now. And so this is the culture bump is saying we can't do that. We are going to crash. If you let my brain just run amok, it will just do that. My brain will run off and whatever. When you're disagreeing with me, it's like, I may not actually take offense as the young man did, but it's like,
He verbalized it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No. And so that kind of a conversation is not one that's going to connect me. That kind of a conversation is not going to get me to a point where I'm connected with him. One of the examples that we use is with a politician that I had a culture bump with, that because in our great state of Texas, he wanted to bring guns on campus, and he was running for office, and I read about him in the paper, and I had a culture bump that morning, and I thought, well, I'm just going to try this on this thing, and I did, and I went through it, and I discovered some things about myself, and then I called him, and I told him that I'd had a culture bump with what he had said, what I'd read in the newspaper, and we had a conversation that went on for about 2 or 3 days. And what happened out of all of that is I came to understand that man has a very different idea about what we need to do about providing security on campus. And I understand where he's coming from. And I absolutely disagree with him. but I will walk across the street to shake his hand if I ever have the chance. And I would not have done that if I hadn't done that for myself. And I sent money to his opponent, and I will do it again. And he told me that he really appreciated the conversation, and he disagreed with me. And we agreed, we really disagree with one another. But I don't see him as some kind of and I'm using this term, you know, like an idiot, an idiotic. He's not an idiot. I think he's wrong, and I will send money to anybody running against him. But I shifted, and when I shifted, he shifted. Mm-hmm. I don't know that that will solve our problems, but I think it's at least a teeny tiny step toward it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how this would work because you've actually put up a structure and made a culture in how you deal with the other person. Mm-hmm. But on the street, you don't have that. In a classroom, you do. Mm-hmm. You have one of your last points was in a controlled situation, it wasn't controlled, you used another word.
In a safe environment, yeah.
In a setting, and the environment was good. And it's like today, we don't have a safe environment where we can disagree with one another.
No. I can tell you for me and for people that I've worked with for a number of years, is that what I seem to be able to do is to more easily step back, to more easily, not necessarily kind of just catch myself, but I know, you see, I've done this enough that I know that there's a connection. I know there's a human over there, and I know that there's a universality. And that allows me to be a little less likely to take the hook and just keep running with it.
A little less abrasive.
Yeah. I'm telling you, this is pre-kinder.
Thank you, Carol Archer, for a very enlightening hour. And we now have snacks out there. Please come and visit with Carol and have something to eat or drink.